According to research done by the authors of the book The Millionaire Next Door, 70% of American millionaires are first generation. This means that in most instances, wealth is not being effectively passed down to the next generation, as it is not being preserved. That generation doesn't know how to handle that much money. How many lottery winners are broke a year or two later? So, to talk about how to deal with inherited wealth, in this episode of the podcast, I talk with Master Life Coach Chase Collins about how people who achieve significant financial independence can prepare their children for the receipt and handling of a significant financial legacy.
My guest today is Chase Collins, a certified master life coach and the founder of the Trust Fund Coach, where he helps inheritors navigate the often overlooked challenges of wealth. With firsthand experience growing up around generational wealth, Chase understands that financial security doesn't automatically lead to clarity, purpose, or fulfillment. His work is dedicated to helping trust fund recipients move beyond guilt, confusion, and societal expectations to build lives they truly love. Through coaching, speaking, and content creation, Chase guides clients through the emotional and financial complexities of inherited wealth. His approach blends personal development, financial literacy, and identity work, giving inheritors the tools they need to make confident, value driven decisions. He challenges outdated narratives about privilege and wealth, helping his clients shift their mindset and take ownership of their future. Welcome to the show, Chase.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, as we spoke before I hit record, this is an important topic because, and I've often talked about this book, The Millionaire Next Door, and the authors talk about how 7 out of 10 American millionaires are first generation. So that kind of begs the question as to how well people are necessarily passing on wealth to their children and creating generational wealth, because if they did, that number would lower. Fewer and fewer American millionaires would be first generation. So I wanted to talk to you not only about how people that inherit wealth can deal with it better and retain it and continue to pass it on, but maybe how the parents to people that are creating the wealth can more effectively pass it on. So I guess the first question is about what kind of mistakes that people that inherit wealth uh, make. What would you say are the three biggest mistakes that they make, and how they can keep from making them?
Yeah. So I would say the three top mistakes I see, it's such a layered thing. So one mistake leads to another with this circumstance.
Uh-huh.
But I would say the first one is just no financial confidence or literacy.
Uh-huh.
I think when people grow up with wealth, they don't really understand the value of a dollar. So when they do receive their inheritance or their own money, it feels like a free for all, and they're used to maybe getting what they want or being able to buy what they want. But um, of course, depending on the size of the inheritance, but money dwindles quick. So I would say that first mistake is just really no understanding of financial literacy or management. And I would say, the thing parents could do to help and avoid this when passing on wealth is just education and getting your kids involved, right? I think a common theme you'll probably hear today is um, kind of just being open, like having an open conversation. And a lot of people feel weird about talking about money and avoid it, right? So I think with financial confidence and literacy, what I encourage my clients to do as well is just really get involved, right? I think a lot of the times inheritors kind of throw their hands up and let the advisors do their thing. A lot of the times, like their family advisors, and they're not involved. So I think, from even my experience, that's really how I started to learn, is just getting involved and kind of understanding what was going on. Um, so that's the first issue and what you can kind of do to help and avoid. The second I would say is a time and lifestyle issue. Um, treating time as if it's unlimited and not having structure, throughout the day. So, when the bills are paid, you don't have this like motivation to like get out there and get a job or go do what you need to do to pay your bills. And I think a lot of the times people can come across their purpose and fulfillment through just getting out there in the workforce and figuring out what you like, figuring out what you don't like. But with this time and lifestyle circumstance, it's really easy to kind of get paralyzed um, and just stuck in the day to day and feel unmotivated. And um, this is also when you see a lot of overindulgence in whatever it might be. It could be drugs and alcohol, it could be shopping or just spending. Um, and I call it buffering. It's kind of a way to distract yourself and make yourself feel something that you are wanting to feel. But, of course, a purchase isn't going to make you feel that. And I would say the one thing, I would say the main thing you like parents could do to help their kids and, with this circumstance is, it comes down to, I think, really like scheduling. I mean, not that the parents can necessarily do that, but as far as like me talking to my clients, I would say like having a schedule and filling your day with meaningful things, meaningful tasks, and kind of and doing what you love, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily be you know um, like a job you don't like or doing something you don't like. I mean, it could be philanthropy or and volunteering or you know whatever it may be. But I think to have some structure and to fill your days is probably the most important thing for that. And then the third kind of main issue I see is this legacy and expectation, and these inheritors really falling into that trap of family expectations, societal expectations, and maybe trying to live up to a legacy that was, built before them. And, um, it's really daunting to actually follow a generation or two generations that have built an empire, right? And not only is there expectation a lot of the time to work in the business and to carry on the business if there still is a business, but also just the expectation to even live up to the legacy even if you're doing something different. It can almost make it more scary to do your own thing because you feel like you have to live up to your parents or your grandparents or whatever it may be. And obviously, the thing parents can do with that is really let their kids be who they are independently of the family business, family money, any empire. Like, really let them explore who they are and what they want to do aside from all of that. And also just opening, if there is a family business and everybody agrees that you want to would they want to work together and somehow make it work. I do believe that there is a place for everyone in a business, right? So it just comes down to unique skills and talents and interests, and I guarantee you can find a position that each person can flourish in.
Hmm. Well, certainly, yeah, absolutely. And that kind of aligns with a lot of what is discussed in that book I mentioned earlier, the Millionaire Next Door, that the uh, parents of the children, as the children are growing and become young adults, engage in what the authors call economic outpatient care, where, they want their kids to have better than they did. So they'll help them buy a house, they'll buy them a car, that sort of thing. And they don't realize how enabling that is in that you said they don't, the child doesn't have direction. Everything is given to them, and that can be a big issue.
Hmm.
But it also talks about how a lot of American millionaires, what they do value is education. And one of the things, even if they don't give them economic outpatient care, do make sure they have an education and some direction in life. So maybe that's sort of the two sides of that coin. And maybe parents should stress more education. What are you going to do with your life? Who are you going to be?
Yep.
And give them that, but don't give them a house, a car, or other things. And they need to earn that themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and also you mentioned about just financial education, and
Hmm.
I've done some episodes on how to talk to your kids about money.
Hmm.
And maybe those are uh, what kind of conversations do you think, especially not only just raise your kids to handle money properly, but in your instance, what you do is how to handle a lot of money properly.
Hmm.
So what tips do you have for parents in teaching their kids that, someday all this will be yours? How do you handle it? How do you teach your kids that?
Yeah. I mean, that is a loaded question and the $1 million question,
Yes,
right?
literally.
Um, yeah, literally, right? Um, that's a tricky one. I think you nailed it. And, your podcast episodes and, could be just what they need. It's having an open conversation with your children. A lot of the times I see these inheritors and their parents like really sheltering them and hiding them from knowing about their inheritance. I had a unique situation growing up where I knew from an early age that I had a trust fund. But my older sisters, for instance, they didn't know until they were 18, 17, 18. So um, I think psychologically it does impact the inheritor a lot more when you're having an open conversation about it and you're aware about it versus kind of just getting a knock on your door and here's millions of dollars or however much it is, right? And so I would just encourage the open conversation, being open about it, and of course, if there is a parent passing down the wealth and it is in their control, I mean, there are ways to structure the trust to, benefit the kid and kind of set them up for success. I'm the youngest of the cousins of where the wealth comes from on my dad's side, and my grandma saw how it impacted my cousins who are much older than me, and she restructured the whole thing for me and my siblings, and it really it's such a blessing, right? And so there's a number of things between the structuring of it and then just having an open conversation.
And you're right, not sort of signaling to them, don't tell them that they're multimillionaires and all this will be yours and things like that. I mean, the kids will, to some extent, from the lifestyle the parents live, depending upon how uh, open it is,
Mm-hmm.
from appearances that they're wealthy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but don't tell them, say, hey, look, we're not going to buy you a car, maybe a used car, or you help pay for it, or some such thing as that, where you teach them these things and teach them how to live like someone who isn't going to be inheriting a lot of wealth,
Yeah.
and sort of start with that and then layer it on as they get older, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think I've seen the tiered structure work really well where, it's kind of given out in distributions throughout a longer period of time. And um, I see how that really sets up the inheritor for success and um, kind of gives you time to think. I think that's probably one of the main things inheritors do is kind of make these rash decisions and they don't really have to think. And at least in my experience, like for bigger purchases that most people think about and save up for and you know Inheritors a lot of the times don't have to think about those repercussions and the consequences, right? Because it's just, you know, your bills are paid and the money is there. And so, yeah,
There's no struggle. Yeah,
there,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And they have and their sense of identity, as you were saying, is in I believe your second mistake that you talk about. Their sense of identity, if you're not careful in the way you raise your children, that their identity will be trust fund baby,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
has quite a negative connotation to it
Hmm.
for a lot of people in society and how they're viewed, and they don't have their own sense of who they are and what they want to be and what they want to accomplish in their lives. And
Yeah.
maybe they see themselves either as, hey, the money will always be there, or maybe even to some extent trapped that to be, that their identity is, taking over the family business and being in that business, whether that's necessarily what they want to do or not.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that whole pay for the education, who you want to be, not only in how to handle money, but who, what you're going to do with your life going forward. So you talk about some other stuff in researching and preparing for this interview. I know that there are other, beyond these three mistakes, there's some other issues that wealth inheritors have, and I wanted to
Hmm.
step through them with you. And the first is sort of a sense of guilt that they associate with wealth. Like I said, the negative connotation of the trust fund baby, and maybe that label in their life makes them feel uncomfortable. They feel, I don't deserve this money, or I shouldn't have it, or it makes them
Hmm.
feel bad. How do you coach people in dealing with that feeling of guilt?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always, my whole business in this book was inspired by my dad and
Uh,
watching my dad and my uncle um, have the circumstance of being taken care of for life and just really struggling. And my dad, he struggled with guilt, the most extreme guilt. He was the funniest, coolest, most humble guy. Everyone loved him. And he just did not understand why me. That was the question. Why me? Why me? Why do I have this? And he would see any other person on the street struggling for food, and he just couldn't wrap his head around that guilt. So it always starts with that question of like, why me? And with my coaching, and because I do believe there is a why. I do believe that if you are in the circumstance of inheriting and being gifted this blessing, if you use it right, um, there is a profound big why, and there is something amazing you can do with it, and people you can help, and people looking for your help. So that's kind of my approach uh, when approaching the guilt with clients, because I do think that when you can give back, when you're doing something you love, when you're helping people, it helps relieve that guilt a little bit, and gives you a greater sense of purpose and understanding of maybe why me.
uh, and from the parents' perspective too, I guess, in stressing the importance of charitable giving.
Hmm.
And the parents, once they do that big reveal and they layer it on, the child is old enough to understand it and say, okay, you're going to be, all this will be yours someday. And stressing that, this is the charitable giving we do. Involve the child in what the parents do in charitable giving and stress the importance of it. And this is the good that you can do with this money when it's yours. And
Yeah,
sort of laying that foundation, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think you brought up charity, and it's so important to, when raising children who are going to inherit, just to really take them and show them the real world. And I think traveling to third world countries, I mean, definitely changed my life, and just seeing the way other people live. Because if you are feeling some sort of guilt or shame around it. I mean, I think just getting your hands dirty and helping and kind of seeing it in itself can help relieve some of that guilt, and when you're passing it forward and helping.
Mhm. So that's the guilt associated with wealth, but also, it goes to the saying of money can't buy happiness, and that feeling that through, I often call it, retail therapy.
Yeah.
You feel good because you went out and bought something and you have nice stuff and the latest car, whatever it is,
Yeah.
that you maintain your personal happiness by spending money. And I would think that that's one way in which people can the people do blow through an inheritance or a lottery win, or these people that come into wealth and then 2 years later they're broke because they see the money as the source of their happiness. So
Yep.
how do you counsel people to you know eschew that and not see it as a source of happiness in their lives? I guess by having their own purpose, as we've talked about, as the source of happiness and not the money itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Shopping was one of my vices for sure. When I first, came into early adulthood, I love luxury things and items and all the fun stuff. And I was living in New York City, and just a dangerous place to be running around with too much time and money. Um, and yeah, you're right. I mean, that is, I think, the number one way people are just running through this wealth. I mean, that plays into the financial management and literacy aspect of it as well. Kind of just going out there and purchasing to feel something, right? And as I know from my own experience, I mean, it you'll have a quick high and then a hard crash quick. It's not a long high. And so anyways, how I kind of approach, coaching with this topic itself and helping my clients is, like you said, purpose, really like diving into purpose. And it also goes back into the time thing. I think, when you have too much time on your hands and you're overthinking and you're overindulging, and you don't have anything on the schedule for the day, you are more likely to go spend a bunch of money. You know, Diving into work myself and writing my book and helping clients and all of that, it's amazing because I always think, I'm like, I'm not spending money. I'm not, like scheduling lunches and, you know, um, randomly spending money. So, um, yeah, so I think it all comes back down to purpose and what you're doing with your time, and also ultimately, like, what do you want to do with your money? Because there is always a deeper want, or desire that people have. There always is. I can always dig out some sort of deeper why, and if you can start to kind of focus your energy and your money on that, then to me, I believe that's the best investment.
Right. Yeah, you have to find happiness in other ways, and
Yeah,
in that, when you do that, you don't look to the money to make you happy. You have something else that does that for you.
right, right.
Uh, Now that goes to the next question. Seeing wealth as their identity.
Mhm.
That, like I said, this is who I am. I'm a trust fund baby. I'm. We all see examples of that in life and celebrity and everything else. That is their identity. That's who they are, as opposed to seeing that wealth as how they maintain financial independence. So how do they? I guess we kind of already talked about this issue of identity, because you just in finding uh, other purpose in life through who you want to be. But any other thoughts or ideas on how to stay away from, or keeping that wealth from dictating your identity?
Yeah, I think, if somebody's falling into the trap of a trust fund baby,
Huh?
um, I think that when somebody is given that sort of title or that, you know, that label, um, I think people just start to act out exactly on that label, whatever it might be, right? And so I think many times if they've been raised to hear that they're a trust fund baby, they're just gonna go act like it, right?
Yeah.
And you just said it in phrasing your question, but the question is, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Like, and what do you want? I mean, what do you want and who do you want to be are the two most painful questions I think a coach will ever ask you, or anyone will ever ask you, um, because that's where it starts, right? If you're feeling stuck or trapped in this trust fund baby role, it starts with figuring out who you want to be and then taking aligned action.
Right. And maybe thinking of it in terms of as you were speaking, but the thought occurred to me the question that people often hear in a job interview, which is, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a good question to ask. What's your future? You know what you're doing now, but what are you working towards? How do you see yourself in 10 years? And really think about that and have a good answer to that question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So that's your identity. One of the other things you talk about with wealth and dealing with wealth is what you call the expectation trap.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, and how do people avoid it, and how do parents teach their kids how to avoid it?
Yeah. So the expectation trap is really this trap that I see inheritors get stuck in, and it goes back to family and society's expectations, and really trying to live up to those expectations. So this is when you are trying to, um, whether it's like make your family happy, make your dad happy, make your grandpa happy, or maybe it's society. Maybe it's like society's expectations on you, and it just actually puts you into a cycle of, um, it's a very destructive cycle, because really when you're stuck in this cycle, there is no personal purpose or values, or really no personal understanding of what it is you want or who you want to be.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think this, it's I think, yeah, as I said at the beginning of this interview, it's definitely one of the top three issues I see among inheritors.
So all these issues that we've been talking about sort of form that trap of what you of identity, of maybe that guilt or that goes with the money that all comes into that, and what you expect of yourself, what your parents may expect of you as far as carrying on the family business, that sort of thing, and what people outside the family expect of you.
Yeah.
So,
And I've also seen it on the other side too, of like, with this label of like a trust fund baby. And as I said, like a lot of the times people are going to act out on whatever label they've been given, right?
uh,
And sometimes there's these negative expectations of like, oh, he's a trust fund baby, he's gonna blow it, or like, there's kind of these there's negative expectations as well, um, which really sets up the inheritor for failure. I mean,
uh,
um, so yeah.
so one of the other things that I would think that wealth inheritors have, or even just wealthy people, is that is the expectation of other people, or the hey, you have wealth, how about help me out, or whatever it is. And the I once asked someone, what would be the first thing you did if you won the lottery? And they said, get an unlisted telephone number.
Mm,
Because once people find out you have money, then this sort of thing comes in, and you don't want to make that worsen your guilt and say, I'm guilty about having this money, and then you give it to other people as a way of dealing with that, and you enable them. But how do you coach people to deal with that problem if they have people, friends or family, say, hey, you've got money, how about helping me out, or investing in this new business I have, or that sort of thing. How do they deal with that?
No is a full sentence, and that's my favorite line. I think that you tapped it right there. I think the guilt is the number one thing that will kind of make you susceptible to being taken advantage of. And this I saw with my dad quite a bit. He felt so much guilt, and people, we grew up in a small town, and everyone knew his circumstance, and he was constantly being asked to borrow money, constantly. And because of his guilt, he always lended money. And, I remember one situation where one couple paid him back, one couple out of all the couple or people who have borrowed money. And it meant so much to him, not because of the money. He always gave it away, not expecting the money back, but just because I think most people feel as if, oh, he doesn't need it. Like he doesn't need it. But so when coaching about, friends and family that are wanting something from you, it's no is a full sentence, and let's figure out like what it is. It's going to vary from person to person, but what is it? Is it guilt that's making you feel a certain way about this? Is it shame? Is it expectation? What is it that's making you feel whatever, however you're feeling, when you're being asked for money or asked to borrow money or whatever it may be, pay for
And
anything?
dealing, no is a full sentence, but it's also not only being comfortable saying no, but being comfortable with the reaction you'll get to say
Yeah,
no. Are you willing to potentially damage those relationships with friends and family by saying no? And maybe not only knows the full sentence, but maybe saying no in the right way. Uh,
yeah.
do you have ways, how do you coach people to say yes? No is a full sentence. You are perfectly justified in saying no. You don't have to lend them the money. But do you have any advice on how to do that without damaging relationships?
Yeah, I think it comes down to really this idea that nobody actually knows what your financial positioning or circumstance is, right? So people hear the term trust fund and the assumptions go wild every single time. You hear the word trust fund and you think millions of dollars and all this money. And so for a personal example, um, I have a family member who has no idea what my siblings and I's financial positioning is, um, and but however expects and assumes that we have whatever they think we have, right? And so that's kind of the angle I like to take when telling somebody no, or um, having that conversation. I had that conversation of, listen, like in my position specifically, it's not like I'm like sitting on all this cash. I don't have all this cash just sitting in my bank. I'm not like, it's all tied up or whatever it is in the market or whatever. And so I think that's the angle to take when telling somebody no, is just, like, I can't, and taking it from that perspective of like, they have no idea what your financial circumstance is, and it's really them asking is coming from assumption and expectation.
Right. You have money, but you don't really have money. It's tied up in stocks or real estate or whatever else it is. It's not necessarily liquid wealth.
Right. And there's terms in every trust, right? So really, like, you can know that somebody's a trust funder, but you really have no idea
Uh-huh.
what they have, what the terms are, and how it works for them, right?
Well, you raise a good point as far as the terms of the trust. I mean, we've been speaking in general about people inheriting wealth, but not necessarily inheriting wealth that is structured into a trust.
Mm-hmm.
So if so maybe that's a lesson too with the parents in helping the children deal with this particular issue is how do they structure that trust? What do they put into it that can so that their children can say, "Hey, look, I'd love to help you out, but the terms of the trust say this, that, and the other thing. It's not my final word. I need to talk to the trustee, whatever the reason is." How can they help their children or their heirs with that by how the trust is structured?
This, I kind of briefly mentioned it before, but my grandma, um, really saw kind of how the structure of the trust was affecting this younger generation, and we're fifth generation, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And so she completely restructured it for us. So instead of getting like pretty much all of it in like a few chunks, she really spread it out for me and my siblings. I mean, she started at 21, and I think the last one is at 40. So it's really spreading it out over a 19, 20-year period. And having like written terms within that trust that where it allows you to be supported in what you need, and maybe the bills are paid and you can go to school or do some of these more productive things. But you're also not getting this huge lump sum of cash and with no sort of advising or direction or accountability, if,
Right.
you know, so, and that's also where I think my dad, I always say it, like my dad, the difference between my dad and us is, he essentially was given millions and millions of dollars in the early 70s at 18 and was told there's a lot more coming and he would pretty much never have to work. And where our situation is completely different because we it's not that at all. We're not set up for life. I'm not set up for life, at least if based on my lifestyle desires and what I want out of life. Like, this isn't going to support me through life. But I think that's the biggest blessing, in this, because I have a little bit of a head start, but it's not this free for all, here's just millions and millions over and over and over again with no accountability and no direction.
Right. And having a third party trustee that has control. So you say, I mean, that really speaks to a lot of the issues we talked about before, in that you've inherited this wealth, but it's a source of income. You're not necessarily getting the corpus, but you're getting a source of income from it. Here's your income for the year. If you want more, get a job, get a purpose, do contribute to society and yourself. So that helps with the guilt because it's a source of income, not necessarily a large amount of wealth. It's finite to an extent. So if you want to supplement it, you need to do something in your life to contribute to it, and it gives you that excuse. I'm sorry, but I got to run this past the trustee.
Yeah.
To if you want more than, I mean, I can't afford to give you the money because I've got to live off what I get from the trust. I don't get everything, and if it's more, I've got to convince the trustee to give me that money, and now you have maybe a third person to blame. You say, "Hey, I'd love to give it to you, but that tight-fisted trustee just won't give me the money." So that can help as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we really covered a lot here, a lot of good information about that, and you mentioned earlier that you have a book. Tell us about this book that you've written and how it helps folks.
Yes. So the title of the book is Trust Your Trust Fund, a little play on words. It's Finding Purpose and Freedom with Inherited Wealth. And it's publishing June 3rd. So it will be out by the time this podcast is out. You can find it at trustyourtrustfund.com. And I have a bunch of free resources and different courses that you can explore. And I also offer one-on-one coaching. And you can see all of my coaching services at thetrustfundcoach.com. And yeah, all my social media handles are Trust Fund Coach, and yeah, it's really about helping inheritors find purpose and freedom and fulfillment. And you know, just if every inheritor could optimize their resources for the greater good and help whoever it is that they're meant to help, because I believe everybody's meant to help somebody, I think the world would be a completely different place. And um, it would, I think the more we talk about it and the more we have this conversation, the easier it's going to be to keep generational wealth. Honestly, I set out to write this book and serve this niche because I just wanted to create something that could have possibly helped my uncle and my dad,
Uh-huh.
and also myself when I first was kind of inheriting and coming to terms with everything and having my own struggles. There aren't a lot of resources out there for this person. So, you know, I tried to cover all the basics and the whole overview in the book, and then we dive deeper in my programs and one-on-one coaching.
Okay, so listeners out there, you get the book. That'll give you a good leaping off point and stuff you can do initially. And then you can follow up with Chase through his website. We'll provide the links to the book and his coaching website and all of his social links so you can engage with him, reach out for help with him. And what was that release date for your book again?
June 3rd.
June 3rd. Okay, so yes,
June 3rd.
this episode is scheduled to come out shortly after that. So it'll be hot off the presses. Make sure to get your copy. So
Yes.
thanks for coming on the show, Chase, and appreciate all the information you've given the listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.